Chapter 1. What is economics? Economics begins with one simple reality. Resources are limited, and every resource has alternative uses. No society, rich or poor, can escape scarcity. Every decision, whether by a nation, a business, or a family, is really a choice between competing uses of what we have. Whenever I choose to use steel to build cars, that same steel cannot be used to build refrigerators or bridges. Every dollar, every acre, every hour of labor can serve only one purpose at a time. Because of that, every decision carries a cost, the value of what I give up. That's the essence of opportunity cost. Nothing in economics happens in isolation. A decision to produce more of one thing means producing less of something else. A farmer who plants corn on a field cannot grow wheat there. A city that devotes more land to parks leaves less for housing or factories. Scarcity forces trade-offs, and economics is the study of how people and societies make those trade-offs. It's not about moral worth or who deserves what. It's about how the world actually functions when everything we want cannot be had in unlimited quantity. Chapter 2. The role of prices. Prices are the heartbeat of the economy. They coordinate the actions of millions of strangers who will never meet, yet somehow manage to deliver bread to stores, gasoline to stations, and electricity to our homes without any central command. A rising price tells producers, bring more. It tells consumers, use less or find an alternative. The moment demand rises faster than supply, say a sudden heat wave pushing up electricity use, higher prices encourage conservation and investment in new capacity. Imagine a drought that cuts the orange harvest in half. The price of orange juice climbs. Shoppers buy less, maybe switch to apple juice. Meanwhile, growers elsewhere expand planting, or importers find other sources. No meeting, no memo, just the quiet signal of price guiding everyone's behavior. This system doesn't need perfect knowledge. Each person responds only to what they see, the new price. That's the miracle of markets. Information that no single mind could ever gather is conveyed through the simple language of supply and demand. When governments interfere with this signaling by freezing or dictating prices, they muffle that language and coordination begins to fail. Chapter 3. Price controls. Price controls are what happen when governments decide to ignore what prices are trying to say. A price ceiling, like rent control, sets a maximum price below what the market would naturally reach. The intention is to make housing affordable. The result is the opposite, a shortage. At the lower rent, more people want apartments, but fewer landlords are willing to rent them. Buildings age without maintenance, new construction slows, and those who already have apartments stay put even when they'd rather move. The result is long waiting lists, favoritism, and black markets under the table. A price floor, like a minimum wage, does the reverse. It keeps prices from falling to the market level. If it's higher than the value of some workers' output, employers simply hire fewer of them. There are now more people looking for jobs than there are jobs available, an artificial surplus of labor, which we call unemployment. The lesson is not that good intentions are bad. It's that intentions don't determine outcomes. When price signals are blocked, the hidden coordination that keeps supply and demand balanced is lost. Shortages, surpluses, and misallocation appear, and the people these laws aim to protect often bear the cost. Chapter 4. An overview of prices. Prices don't just tell us how much to buy or sell. They also direct where, when, and what quality things are produced. A rising wage in one city draws workers there, balancing labor shortages. Higher land prices push development upward instead of outward. A sudden drop in copper prices can signal producers to shift toward aluminum or plastic. These constant adjustments happen automatically through the price mechanism. No planner could ever gather or process this much information in real time. What makes the price system powerful is its ability to handle complexity without anyone being in charge. Each individual acts in self-interest, yet the overall result, if left free, is coordination and efficiency far beyond what any bureaucracy could achieve. The moment those signals are distorted, The chain reaction breaks. Shortages appear not because of greed or malice, but because the crucial information embedded in prices has been silenced. That's why understanding prices is the foundation of understanding economics itself. They are not just numbers, they are messages, carrying the sum of human preferences, costs, and possibilities. Chapter 5. The Rise and Fall of Businesses. Every business, no matter how large or dominant, lives under one law: profit and loss. Profit is not a reward for greed. It's a signal that resources are being used efficiently, that what's produced is valued by others more than the cost of the inputs. Losses are the opposite signal. They tell us that society's resources are being wasted on things people don't value enough to pay for. A business grows when it meets needs better or cheaper than others. It declines when it stops doing so. That rise and fall is not tragedy, it's how progress happens. Think of how few people buy typewriters today. That entire industry collapsed, but the same resources, metal, labor, factory space, didn't vanish. They moved into computers, software, and digital tools that serve modern needs. The constant turnover of businesses, often called creative destruction, is how living economies renew themselves. Trying to protect old firms or old jobs from failure often means trapping society's resources in yesterday's technology and keeping consumers from tomorrow's improvements. Survival is never guaranteed. In markets, the public is the final judge, and the verdict comes in the form of prices, sales, and profits. Chapter 6. The Role of Profits and Losses. Profits do far more than enrich individuals. They guide the movement of resources. A rise in profits within one industry is like a beacon. It says, "More is wanted here." Capital flows in, new producers enter, innovation accelerates. As supply grows, profits shrink again, and balance is restored. The opposite happens when profits disappear. Resources leave that line of production and move to others. Losses are just as important. They are the economy's self-correction. A company that keeps wasting steel or labor eventually runs out of money to keep doing it. The pain of loss prevents endless misallocation. Governments often try to shield firms from loss through bailouts or subsidies. But every dollar saved that way comes from taxpayers who must now pay more or get less. Society still bears the loss. It's just hidden. Profits and losses, left to work freely, are like feedback in a control system. They keep an economy aligned with what people actually want, not with what politicians imagine they should want. Chapter 7. The Economics of Big Business. Large corporations are often accused of dominating markets. Yet in a truly open system, even giants are disciplined by competition, consumer choice, and the pursuit of profit. A company that abuses its position soon faces rivals, substitutes, or new technologies that erode its power. Think of Kodak, once untouchable in film, undone by digital photography. Market dominance without innovation is a short-lived illusion. Government, on the other hand, can make power permanent. When laws, regulations, and political favors protect certain firms, competition is strangled. The line between capitalism and crony capitalism lies right there. Lobbying for tariffs, subsidies, or regulatory advantages turns business energy away from serving customers and toward manipulating the political process. Every dollar spent protecting a privilege is a dollar not spent innovating. True capitalism doesn't give anyone guaranteed profits. It gives everyone the freedom to try, the freedom to fail, and the discipline that comes from serving the consumer better than anyone else. Chapter 8. Regulation and Antitrust Laws. Regulation exists to protect the public from abuse, but when misunderstood, it can do the opposite. Markets already contain a natural discipline: competition. When a business mistreats customers or raises prices unjustly, competitors step in to offer better service, forcing improvement or extinction. But when regulations replace competition, inefficiency spreads quietly, protected by law. Antitrust laws were created to stop collusion, price fixing, and genuine monopolies. In theory, they preserve the free market. In practice, they often punish success itself, targeting large firms simply for being efficient. A business that gains market share by offering better products or lower prices is not a threat to the public. It's a benefit. Yet political pressure can turn such success into a liability, as rivals use government to do what they couldn't achieve in the marketplace. True monopoly power rarely comes from private size. It comes from government privilege, laws, licenses, and barriers that exclude competitors. When politicians pick winners, consumers lose their power of choice. The purpose of regulation should never be to restrain the strong, but to preserve freedom, ensuring that anyone, large or small, can enter the market and compete fairly. Chapter 9. Market and non-market economies. In a market economy, decisions arise from millions of voluntary exchanges. In a non-market economy, decisions are imposed from above. Both systems allocate resources, but only one learns from mistakes. When prices are free to move, they carry information. What's scarce, what's needed, what's wasteful. When prices are dictated, that information disappears. A central planner cannot possibly know the countless preferences, costs, and trade-offs of every worker, farmer, or factory. Without feedback from prices and profits, production continues blindly, even when goods pile up unused or shortages persist. Market economies thrive because errors are corrected automatically. Losses end bad ideas. Non-market economies preserve errors indefinitely because failure is politically protected. The more a government replaces market signals with commands, the less efficient the system becomes. It begins with good intentions, fairness, equality, control, and ends with stagnation, scarcity, and corruption. Freedom of prices is not chaos. It's the quiet coordination that keeps millions of strangers working in harmony, each guided by simple incentives that no ministry could ever replicate. Chapter 10. Productivity and Pay. Wages rise when output rises, not when laws or feelings demand it. A worker's true value is measured by what they produce, not how long they labor. Two people can work equally hard, yet the one using better tools, training, or technology will earn more because they produce more. Productivity is the engine of prosperity. When businesses invest in capital and innovation, workers share the gain through higher wages and better conditions. That's why entire nations grow rich when they focus on efficiency instead of redistribution. Competition keeps employers honest. No firm can pay below the market rate for long without losing talent. Likewise, no worker can demand above-market pay without producing equivalent value. The surest path to higher income is not legislation, but learning, improving skills, knowledge, and discipline so each hour of work creates more value than before. Chapter 11. Minimum Wage Laws. Few policies sound more compassionate than raising the minimum wage, and few have harmed more of the people they were meant to help. When the price of labor is forced above its market value, employers hire fewer workers, especially the young, the unskilled, and the inexperienced. The result is not better pay for all, but no pay for many. Businesses survive only by balancing cost with productivity. If a worker produces $8 of value per hour, a law requiring $15 makes hiring impossible. Those on the margins are quietly replaced by automation, efficiency, or closure. The damage is invisible. The job never created, the experience never gained. Meanwhile, those who keep their jobs may see higher wages, but also higher prices, as businesses pass costs along to consumers. Raising wages through law cannot substitute for raising productivity. Real compassion means creating opportunity, not illusions. A job at a fair market wage is better than no job at all. Chapter 12. Special Problems in Labor Markets. Labor markets are not uniform. Each job differs in risk, required skill, and working conditions, and wages adjust accordingly. A dangerous job must pay more than a safe one to attract workers. An enjoyable job may pay less because people value its comfort. Every choice involves trade-offs between money, safety, satisfaction, and freedom. Governments often try to override these natural adjustments by mandating equal pay, restricting entry into trades, or protecting certain unions. But every restriction narrows opportunity for someone else. Licensing laws, for example, can block poor or immigrant workers from jobs they could otherwise do, keeping prices high for consumers and wages low for the excluded. Unions can protect members in the short term, but harm the broader economy when they prevent flexibility or productivity improvements. Ultimately, wages depend on value created, not on political power or sentiment. Healthy labor markets rely on mobility and choice. The more freely people can change jobs, learn new skills, and seek better terms, the more fairly and efficiently everyone is rewarded. Chapter 13. Investment. Every act of investment is a trade between the present and the future. To invest is to forego consumption now in the hope of producing more later. That simple principle builds civilizations. Factories, machines, research, education, all exist because someone delayed gratification to create lasting value. But investment is never certain. The future holds both opportunity and risk. A wise investor studies demand, scarcity, and efficiency, placing resources where they'll yield the most over time. A reckless one chases trends or ignores cost, destroying wealth instead of creating it. The same is true for nations. When capital is guided by profit, it flows naturally toward the most productive uses. When guided by politics, it flows toward influence and waste. Investment determines tomorrow's standard of living. It funds the innovations that raise wages, extend life, and make prosperity possible for future generations. Without it, a society spends what it has and stops growing. Rich today, poor tomorrow. Chapter 14. Stocks, bonds, and insurance. Finance exists to manage uncertainty, to connect savers with borrowers and spread risk across many shoulders. Stocks represent ownership. When I buy shares, I take on part of a company's risk and share in its profit or loss. If the business grows, my wealth grows with it. If it fails, I bear part of the cost. This system rewards accurate judgment and punishes careless speculation, channeling capital toward productive ventures. Bonds are promises, loans to governments or companies that pay interest over time. They offer steadier returns, but less upside. Together, stocks and bonds let people choose how much risk they want to bear. Insurance protects against specific losses. By pooling small premiums from many people, it allows those struck by disaster to recover without ruin. But insurance only works when honesty and incentives align. If people feel no risk because they're fully covered, they act carelessly, a problem known as moral hazard. In every financial system, risk can't be eliminated, only priced and shared. Healthy markets keep that balance transparent, rewarding prudence and discouraging recklessness. Chapter 15. Special problems of time and risk. Time changes everything, including value. $1 today is worth more than $1 next year, because today's dollar can be used, invested, or enjoyed immediately. That difference is the foundation of interest. Interest rates tie together savers and borrowers, present and future. They rise when people prefer current consumption and fall when they're willing to wait. When governments manipulate those rates, they distort that relationship, encouraging bubbles or starving investment. Risk magnifies with time. The further into the future a project reaches, the greater the chance that tastes, technology, or politics will change. That's why long-term ventures demand higher returns. They carry more uncertainty. Speculation is often misunderstood. At its best, it helps markets absorb risk by anticipating future changes in value. At its worst, it becomes gambling detached from production, a frenzy that ends in collapse. Prudent risk-taking drives growth. Excessive or shielded risk destroys it. Time rewards discipline and punishes denial, whether in business, government, or personal life. Chapter 16. National Output. A nation's output is the total value of all goods and services it produces. It's real wealth creation, not its money supply. When we measure national output, we're measuring the flow of production that sustains living standards. It's easy to confuse money with wealth. Printing more money doesn't make a country richer. It simply changes the numbers on the same pile of goods. Real output comes from labor, capital, and innovation working together efficiently. The more productive these factors become, the higher the standard of living. Economic growth isn't mysterious. It's the accumulation of better tools, better knowledge, and better organization. But growth also depends on freedom of movement, of labor, capital, and ideas. When policies or monopolies block that movement, resources stay trapped in low-value uses. Nations prosper when they allow competition to direct resources where they do the most good. In short, wealth isn't what's printed in a mint. It's what's produced in factories, fields, offices, and mines. Chapter 17. Money and the Banking System. Money exists to make exchange easier. Without it, trade would require coincidence, each person needing exactly what the other has at the same time. Money is a medium of exchange, a store of value, and a unit of account. Its power comes from trust, the shared belief that others will accept it tomorrow. Banks multiply that trust. When I deposit money, the bank lends most of it out, keeping only a fraction in reserve. This system, fractional reserve banking, creates credit, which expands the economy. But it also introduces vulnerability. If everyone demands their deposits at once, the system freezes. Central banks exist to manage that risk. They regulate credit, set interest rates, and act as lenders of last resort. Their goal is stability, but the line between stabilizing and distorting is thin. When too much credit is created, the value of money falls, prices rise, and the illusion of prosperity replaces real growth. When credit is too tight, businesses starve for capital and unemployment spreads. The health of the banking system is therefore the pulse of the entire economy. Too slow, and growth dies. Too fast, and inflation burns. Chapter 18. Government Functions. Government performs essential economic functions that private markets cannot handle efficiently. Defense, law enforcement, and basic infrastructure protect and enable all other activity. Without a stable legal framework, contracts mean nothing and commerce collapses. But there's a balance to strike. The same power that can uphold markets can also strangle them when it grows beyond necessity. Each new regulation or subsidy shifts resources by political favor instead of economic merit. The real test of government action isn't whether the goal sounds noble. It's whether the result uses resources better than the market would have. When governments build roads or fund research, they may create long-term benefits. When they protect industries from competition, they often breed stagnation. The goal should never be to replace markets, but to create the conditions in which markets can function freely and fairly. Chapter 19. Government Finance. Every dollar the government spends must come from somewhere. Taxes, borrowing, or the printing press. Taxes take directly from private production. Borrowing takes indirectly, promising repayment later. Printing money takes invisibly through inflation. The illusion that government can create wealth by spending ignores the source of its funds. Every public project diverts resources from private ones, so the only question is whether the trade-off is worth it. Deficits allow politicians to buy present popularity at future cost. Borrowed money can fund wars, relief, or infrastructure, but it also accumulates interest, creating an unseen burden on future taxpayers. Inflation is the quietest tax of all. By increasing the money supply faster than output, governments reduce the purchasing power of everyone's savings while avoiding an explicit vote for higher taxes. Fiscal responsibility, then, isn't a matter of ideology. It's a matter of arithmetic. A nation that lives beyond its means eventually pays through either higher taxes, higher prices, or broken promises. Chapter 20. Special Problems in the National Economy. Every economy faces internal tensions between growth and stability, employment and inflation, short-term relief and long-term cost. Policies designed to solve one problem often worsen another. Price controls on rent can cause housing shortages, subsidies for farmers can raise food prices, efforts to guarantee jobs can weaken productivity. Each policy must be judged not by its intentions, but by its consequences. Business cycles, booms followed by busts, are another recurring challenge. Easy credit and optimism lead to expansion. Overconfidence and debt bring contraction. The cure is rarely more manipulation, but discipline, allowing markets to correct and rebuild from real value instead of illusion. Governments are often tempted to smooth every downturn with more spending or looser credit. But when pain is constantly postponed, imbalances grow until correction becomes catastrophic. Economic maturity means accepting that stability cannot come from denial. Healthy economies bend and recover. Sick ones are kept standing only by injections that lose power over time. Chapter 21. International Trade. Trade between nations works on the same principles as trade between individuals. Each country specializes in what it can produce most efficiently and exchanges for what others produce better. This is called comparative advantage, and it's one of the most powerful and misunderstood ideas in economics. Even if one nation is more productive in every industry than another, it still benefits from trade by focusing on what it does best and importing what it does less efficiently. When every country does this, total output rises for all. Tariffs and trade barriers disrupt this harmony. They protect certain industries in the short term, but at the expense of everyone else. Consumers pay higher prices, exporters face retaliation, and resources get trapped in less productive uses. Trade deficits often sound alarming, but they simply mean a nation imports more goods than it exports. Those goods are paid for by investments flowing the other way. Foreign capital building factories, buying bonds, or funding businesses. The key is not whether trade is balanced, but whether it's free enough for each participant to specialize and prosper. The real measure of success is not exports or imports alone. It's how much better ordinary people live because of the goods, jobs, and opportunities global trade makes possible. Chapter 22. International Transfers of Wealth. Money constantly flows between nations through investments, aid, loans, and remittances from workers abroad. These transfers can help or harm depending on how they're used. When capital flows toward productive investment, building infrastructure, training workers, creating new industries, it raises living standards for both sides. But when money is given as perpetual aid without accountability, it often props up corrupt regimes and destroys self-reliance. Sincere intentions can't override economic incentives. A country receiving endless grants or debt forgiveness has less reason to reform and more reason to depend on others. Likewise, when rich countries lend at below-market rates, they encourage wasteful projects that would never survive market scrutiny. True wealth transfer happens when knowledge, technology, and productivity flow across borders, not just money. Japan, South Korea, and Singapore became prosperous not through donations, but through adaptation, discipline, and work. What they received from others was not charity, but opportunity, and they used it. The lesson is clear. Capital without responsibility breeds dependency. Opportunity with accountability breeds growth. Chapter 23. International Disparities in Wealth. The world's wealth is not evenly distributed, and never has been. But the differences between rich and poor nations cannot be explained by resources alone. Natural wealth means little without the institutions, habits, and incentives that make productive use of it. Many resource-rich countries remain poor because corruption, instability, or ideology prevent investment and innovation. Meanwhile, nations with few natural advantages, like Switzerland or Japan, thrive through education, work ethic, and trust in markets. Colonial history, geography, and politics all play roles. but none explain why once poor nations like South Korea now outproduce former empires. The real difference lies in how societies treat knowledge, property, and freedom. When laws are clear, contracts are honored, and individuals can profit from their effort, human creativity flourishes. When governments confiscate, restrict, or manipulate markets, initiative dies. Wealth disparities will always exist to some degree, but the gap between stagnation and progress is determined less by fate than by policy. A society that encourages production will rise. One that rewards dependency will fall, no matter how much aid it receives. Chapter 24. Myths about markets. Markets are often accused of being chaotic, unfair, or driven purely by greed. But what critics call chaos is really coordination. Millions of people adjusting simultaneously to changes in supply, demand, and technology, guided by prices rather than orders. The myth that markets are unfair ignores that fairness in outcomes is not the same as fairness in process. A basketball player earns more than a teacher not because society values education less, but because the market for professional athletes is driven by global demand and limited talent. The same freedom that allows some to earn fortunes also allows others to find opportunities that didn't exist before. Another myth is that profits come at the expense of workers or consumers. In reality, profits are evidence that resources have been used efficiently, that consumers value what was produced more than the cost to produce it. When profits are high, new competitors enter, prices fall, and consumers benefit again. Perhaps the most dangerous myth is that governments can plan and distribute resources better than markets. History shows the opposite. From food shortages under socialism to collapsed industries and planned economies, attempts to replace price signals with politics lead to waste and stagnation. Markets are not perfect, but they are adaptive. They learn from mistakes, while central planners often double down on theirs. Freedom to choose, fail, and try again remains the best mechanism ever discovered for matching human wants with human effort. Chapter 25. Non-economic values. Economics deals with trade-offs, not ultimate meanings. But societies must still balance economic efficiency with moral, cultural, and environmental values that can't be priced in dollars alone. For example, preserving a historic site may be inefficient in purely financial terms, yet priceless in heritage. Limiting child labor may reduce short-term output, but uphold human dignity. The danger lies in ignoring trade-offs altogether. Policies made in the name of compassion often produce the opposite result when they ignore economic reality. Rent control, meant to help tenants, can destroy housing supply. Agricultural subsidies meant to feed the poor can inflate food prices worldwide. Economic reasoning doesn't dictate moral choices. It clarifies their cost. It forces us to see what we give up when we choose one good over another. Values matter, but so do consequences. A society that pretends intentions are enough eventually finds itself unable to afford either morality or prosperity. Chapter 26. The History of Economics. Economics as a discipline grew from a simple question: why are some nations rich while others remain poor? Early thinkers like Adam Smith saw that wealth wasn't gold or land. It was productivity, driven by specialization and voluntary exchange. Later economists built on that foundation, studying how prices, wages, and trade flow through an interconnected system. Over time, schools of thought diverged. The classical economists emphasized freedom and self-regulation. Keynesian economics focused on government's role in stabilizing demand. Others explored monetary policy, incentives, and information, each adding insight and sometimes confusion. But beneath the theories, one truth endures. No one can repeal the laws of supply and demand. They operate in every age, under every system, whether acknowledged or denied. economic fallacies tend to resurface in new forms. Price controls renamed as fair pricing, protectionism disguised as strategic industry policy. Each generation must learn the same lesson again. Intentions don't erase consequences. Progress in economics, then, is less about discovering new truths and more about remembering old ones. Chapter 27. Parting Thoughts. Economics is not a set of formulas or opinions. It's a way of seeing. It teaches that choices have costs, that incentives shape behavior, and that reality always has the final word. When we understand this, we stop asking what should be done in theory and start asking what will happen in practice. We learn to look beyond immediate results to the long chain of consequences that follow. A society that ignores those lessons drifts toward policies that sound humane but destroy opportunity. A society that applies them grows freer, more prosperous, and more just, not by decree, but by discipline. Scarcity, competition, and trade-offs will never disappear. But within them lies the potential for endless creativity, if people are left free to think, to build, and to exchange. Economics, at its heart, is not about money. It's about life. How human beings, each with limited time and means, find ways to improve their condition and, in doing so, improve the world. You've just heard Thomas Sowell's principles of lasting prosperity. If you're ready to apply them, get the 40 or 60-year Bill Tracker, a lifetime system to build wealth and track progress. You'll find it linked below. Subscribe for more.